He was slumped against a brick wall outside a bakery in downtown Seattle. Rain pelted his back like punishment, and his cough echoed through the empty street, wet, weak, and forgotten. His clothes were soaked. His shoes, if you could even call them that, were two mismatched relics wrapped in duct tape. People passed him like a stain on the sidewalk. Nobody stopped. Nobody saw him. Until she did. 9 years old. Ponytail swinging. A plastic bag of discount groceries in one hand, and an oversized coat wrapped tightly around her skinny frame. Her name was Lily. She saw him shivering, just bones under soggy rags, and without hesitation, without asking her grandma or waiting for permission, she did something almost no adult had done for him in years. She knelt down, pulled off the only warm thing she had, her threadbare blanket, patched at the corners and faded from too many winters, and she gently laid it across his shoulders. "You can have my blanket," she whispered. "It's not much, but it's warm. My grandma says warm things matter." The man didn't say a word. His lips trembled, not from cold, but from something deeper, something broken inside him that had just been touched for the first time in a very, very long time. What Lily didn't know was that the man wrapped in her blanket used to own half the city, that he vanished from the headlines 5 years ago, after tragedy shattered his life and sent him spiraling into a silence no one could reach. She didn't know his name would one day appear in newspapers again because of her, and she couldn't possibly know what he would do next. Because when a forgotten billionaire rises from the shadows, he doesn't just repay kindness. He rewrites lives. What happened over the next 48 hours would shake a community, humble a nation, and leave even the most cynical hearts asking, what if the richest person you'll ever meet is the one you almost ignored? Stay with me. Subscribe to Life-Changing Tales channel and comment where you're watching from. This is a story you'll never forget. Lily Mae Turner lived on the edge of the city and the edge of society, in a peeling 2-room apartment with rusted radiators and a ceiling that coughed every time it rained. She shared it with her grandmother, Miss Clara, a retired lunch lady with lungs full of gravel and a heart far too big for their tiny space. Rent was always late. The pantry was mostly empty, and the electricity bill sat unopened on the kitchen counter like a threat they couldn't afford to answer. But Lily? Lily was sunshine wrapped in second-hand clothes. She didn't complain. She didn't ask why other kids got lunch money or cable TV. She just helped. She swept the steps for old Mr. Hernandez next door. She read mail out loud for Miss Edith, who couldn't see anymore. And on cold mornings, she slipped extra bread crusts from school lunch into her coat pocket. Not for herself, but for the pigeons behind the church. She was 9 years old, with shoes too small and hope too large. And every evening, on her walk home from school, she passed the same alleyway behind Morelli's bakery. That's where he sat. The man. He didn't speak, didn't beg, just sat there, every day, hunched in the shadows like he belonged to the bricks. His beard was wild, his coat stitched with duct tape, and his eyes, the rare times she saw them, looked like they'd once seen a life with meaning, and then lost it. Some people whispered he was dangerous. Others said he was crazy. Most just said nothing at all. But Lily noticed. She noticed he never asked for money, never took up space, never shouted at the sky like the other lost souls on the avenue. He just sat there, quiet, dignified in some strange, invisible way. And though she didn't know why, she always slowed her steps when she passed, always clutched her grocery bag tighter, and always, always wondered what had happened to him. Was he cold at night? Did anyone remember his name? Had he ever had a little girl like her? Miss Clara once told her, "Kindness is the only thing that makes the world less cold." So Lily tried. She really did. She gave him half an apple once, left it beside him and walked away. The next day, it was gone. She slipped him a clean pair of socks once, stolen from the donation bin at school. She never told anyone. And then, the blanket, the only thing between her and the drafty winter nights. She gave it away, just like that. Because sometimes even at 9, you know when someone else needs it more than you do. She didn't do it for praise. She didn't do it for attention. She did it because it was right. What Lily didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that the man in the alley had once signed checks with 6 zeros, that he used to walk red carpets, shake hands with governors, and own a portfolio that could crash a market with one whisper. She didn't know his name was Elijah Rain, once listed in Forbes' youngest tech billionaires, now erased from memory like dust in the wind. Because 5 years ago, he vanished. No press release, no will, no body. The world assumed he'd snapped, fled, or worse, until Lily Mae Turner knelt beside him in the rain and changed everything. And in that one selfless act, she unknowingly ignited the greatest comeback story Wall Street would ever whisper about. But for now, she was just Lily, a poor girl with too much heart and too little food, trying to make it one day at a time, unaware that fate was about to ring her doorbell wearing the face of a forgotten king. It was the kind of night that made the gutters cry, rain slamming the sidewalks like glass breaking over and over. The wind howled down the alleyways like it was chasing ghosts, and most people, even the toughest, stayed inside. But Lily Mae Turner didn't have that luxury. She was hurrying home from the corner store, her thin coat soaked through, her arms clutching a small bag with a dented can of chicken soup and 2 aspirin packets. All she could afford for her grandmother's chest cold, but when she passed the alley, she stopped cold. He was there, but not sitting. He was on the ground, curled up, motionless, his face pale under the flickering street lamp, his lips blue, his body shivering so hard it looked like his soul was trying to escape. Lily dropped her groceries. "Sir?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer, just a faint, rattling breath, and then a cough, wet, deep, and terrifying. For a second she stood there, frozen. Then she remembered what Grandma Clara always said. You don't need to be rich to save a life, just brave. So Lily did something no one else would have done. She grabbed his arm. "I can't carry you," she whispered, "but you can lean on me." And inch by inch, step by step, she walked him home. Her sneakers squeaked, her knees buckled, her arms ached. But she didn't stop, not once. When they finally reached the door, her grandmother looked up in shock. "Lily Mae Turner, who is that?" "He's sick, Grandma. I couldn't leave him." Clara tried to protest. "Baby, we have soup," Lily said, already guiding the man to the mattress on the floor. "And we still got 1 aspirin left." That night, the heat barely worked. The windows trembled. But Lily wrapped him in every blanket they had, except the one she'd already given him. That one was still on his shoulders, soaked but warm with memory. She spoon-fed him broth with careful hands, held a damp cloth to his forehead, whispered stories until the fevered twitching slowed. He didn't speak, not once, but his eyes followed everything she did. And when he finally turned his head toward the nightstand, his gaze locked on the framed photograph beside her bed, A black and white image faded by time. A young man in a military uniform. Strong jaw, confident eyes. Holding hands with a smiling woman holding a baby. Clara's husband, Lily's grandfather, killed in action before Lily was born. The man on the mattress stared at it like it punched a hole through his chest. And then, his lips trembled. His eyes watered. But he said nothing. He turned his face away and closed his eyes. Lily didn't notice the tear that rolled into the blanket. She was already asleep beside her grandmother, curled on the couch, dreaming of soup cans that never ran out. But the man didn't sleep. He lay there all night, listening to the coughing from the next room, watching the ceiling peel, smelling the leftover broth in the pot. And for the first time in 5 years, Elijah Rain remembered what it felt like to be seen, not as a name on a news headline, not as a number on a portfolio, but as a human being, broken, yes, but still breathing. And he knew then, with clarity sharper than any boardroom epiphany, that this little girl hadn't just saved his life. She'd given it back to him. The days that followed were quiet. Almost too quiet. The kind of silence that holds its breath. Elijah never asked for anything. Not food, not comfort, not even a second chance. But he stayed. And in the warmth of their tiny apartment, tucked between peeling wallpaper and the scent of fried onions, something strange began to happen. He started fixing things. One morning, Lily woke up and the bathroom tap wasn't dripping anymore. The next, the door that always creaked open like a horror movie, it swung smooth and silent. By the end of the week, the lamp that had sat dead for 2 years flickered to life. Not because they bought a new one, they couldn't afford it, but because Elijah had rewired it. Quietly, in the dark, while everyone slept. Clara noticed first. "Who taught you how to do all that?" she asked, squinting at him from across the room. Elijah gave the smallest of shrugs. "Old job," he muttered, eyes on his hands. But Lily saw more than that. She watched how his fingers moved. Precise, deliberate, like a man used to working with blueprints, not just wires. She noticed the way he looked at their broken space, not with pity, but with potential. And sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he would sit by the window with a pencil and paper, sketching. Circles, arrows, geometric shapes, boxes with notes scribbled beside them. One afternoon, Lily crept over and peeked. At the center of the page was a logo, a sleek minimalist icon with sharp edges and bold letters underneath. She didn't recognize it. Not yet. But someone on Wall Street would have dropped their coffee. Because it was the logo of Eonsys, a multi-billion-dollar AI tech firm that once revolutionized cybersecurity. The company Elijah Rain had built from scratch and walked away from. He folded the paper quickly when he saw her looking. "Just doodling," he said with a faint smile. "Dreams don't cost anything." She tilted her head. "You talk like someone who had big dreams once." He looked at her, really looked, and for a second, something flickered in his eyes. Not sadness, not pain, but memory, like someone remembering what hope used to taste like. He nodded slowly. "I did," he whispered. "Once." That evening, as Clara dozed off to her cough syrup and the radio played an old blues station, Elijah sat with Lily at the kitchen table, fixing a wobbly chair leg. "You ever planted tomatoes?" he asked suddenly. She shook her head. "No garden." He chuckled. "Doesn't matter. Business is like planting. You don't just throw seeds and walk away. You water them, watch them, pull the weeds, talk to the soil like it listens." She stared at him, confused but fascinated. He went on. People think success is fast. It's not. It's patience, timing, and knowing when to let the sun do its work. That night, Lily wrote down those words in her notebook, and the next morning, Elijah left early, said he was going to look for some work. He came back with bread, fresh, still warm, not the kind you find in a donation bin, but a bakery loaf wrapped in brown paper and paid for in cash. "Where'd you get this?" Clara asked, suspicious. "Fixed a fence for someone," Elijah replied. She didn't believe him. Not really, but she didn't press, because something had shifted. He was walking straighter. His voice had gained weight. And once, when Lily dropped a glass, he caught it mid-air with the reflex of a man who'd once faced things far faster than falling glass. Something was different. Something was off. And the biggest clue came a week later, when Lily opened the junk drawer to grab batteries and found a letter she didn't recognize. It was addressed to Elijah Rain, typed, elegant, stamped with the seal of the New York State Bar Association, and it was unopened. Who was this man? Why did he know so much about engineering, wiring, business strategy, and planting seeds?
Why did he know so much about engineering, wiring, business strategy, and planting seeds? Why did his hands look like they'd once signed contracts instead of clutched soup spoons? And why? Why did someone like him end up sleeping in an alley, forgotten by the world? Lily didn't ask him yet, but she kept the letter, and a question bloomed in her chest like spring through concrete. Was he really who he claimed to be? Or was Elijah Rain something much more than even they imagined? Because behind his silence was a story waiting to explode. And when it did, it wouldn't just change their lives. It would shake the entire city. And just like that, he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation. Only a single note left on the kitchen table, scribbled in careful handwriting. "Thank you for seeing me when the world didn't. You'll understand soon." He didn't take the soup. He didn't touch the spare cash Clara kept in the cookie tin. All he took was the memory of a girl's kindness, and the blanket she'd given him, now folded neatly under his arm when he walked into the dawn. Lily cried that night, not loud, but the kind of cry that pulls from deep inside, confused, hurt, abandoned all over again. He had become part of her world, part of their rhythm, and now it was like he'd never existed, except for the fixed tap, the working lamp, and the empty chair at their tiny table. Clara tried to reassure her. Sometimes the best people are just passing through to remind us who we are. But Lily couldn't let it go. She kept the note under her pillow, folded beside her dreams. And then, the very next morning, their street woke to something it had never seen before. 6 black SUVs, sleek, polished, unmarked, engines humming low like panthers about to pounce, men in suits, sunglasses, earpieces, the kind you don't ask questions to. A sleek town car pulled up behind them, and when the back door opened, the neighborhood gasped, not because they knew him, but because the media did. Within minutes, reporters crowded the sidewalks, flashes lit the gray sky, and headlines were breaking across every news channel. Elijah Rain, missing billionaire tech genius, found living on streets. Former CEO of Eonsis returns after 5 years in hiding. From alleyway to press conference, the unbelievable redemption of a tech legend. It was him, but not the broken, rain-soaked man they remembered. Now he stood tall, clean-shaven, in a tailored suit that looked like it cost more than Lily's entire building. But one thing hadn't changed: the way he held himself. Calm, unbothered, like a man who'd faced the storm and walked out with a story to tell. And in his hands, folded perfectly across his lap like a badge of honor, Lily's blanket, not replaced, not discarded, still patched, still faded, still hers. That single image, the billionaire stepping out of a luxury vehicle with a child's tattered blanket across his knees, broke the internet. People didn't know what to make of it. Was it a publicity stunt? A hoax? A brand revival campaign? But no one could fake the way Elijah's voice cracked when a reporter shouted, "Where have you been all these years?" He answered simply, "Trying to remember why I mattered. A little girl reminded me. She gave me warmth, and in doing so, gave me purpose again." Lily watched all of it on the old TV Clara kept in the kitchen, the signal barely holding. She didn't blink once. Her hand covered her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from confusion this time, but from realization. It was him, the man she fed soup to, the man who fixed her lamp, the man who spoke in metaphors and planted hope where none existed. Elijah Rain hadn't just vanished. He'd unraveled. And in her home, her tiny, forgotten corner of the world, he had slowly stitched himself back together. That afternoon, a courier arrived at their door. He wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans and a navy polo. He handed Lily a small box with no words, only a nod. Inside, a tablet with a handwritten note stuck to the screen. "Turn me on. There's something I want you to see." Clara helped her power it up. What appeared next made both of them gasp. It was the homepage of unforgettable Foundation, a newly launched nonprofit dedicated to educational equity, housing for displaced families, and mentorship programs for low-income youth. At the top corner of the homepage, it read, "Inspired by Lily Mae Turner." She scrolled down. There was a section called Lily's Library, a scholarship fund offering books, supplies, and tech access to girls in underserved communities. There was a section called Lily's Library, a scholarship fund offering books, supplies, and tech access to girls in underserved communities. And below it, a line, "Because one warm act in a cold world can light 1,000 futures." From that moment forward, nothing was ever the same. Not for Lily, not for her grandmother, and not for the world that suddenly remembered Elijah Rain. Not as the billionaire who disappeared, but as the man who returned because a child reminded him he was still human. And in every photo that went viral afterward, no matter the boardroom or gala or tech summit, Elijah always had the blanket. The press conference wasn't supposed to be emotional. It was supposed to be business. A simple statement, a public re-entry, a headline to settle Wall Street's pulse. But Elijah Rain had never been simple. He stepped up to the podium, cameras flashing, microphones pointed like questions waiting to strike. The room buzzed. Investors, reporters, tech execs, all whispering about his years away, his mysterious reappearance, the child, the blanket. He adjusted the mic, cleared his throat, then paused. And when he spoke, his voice wasn't polished. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped being myself. Maybe it was the day I buried my daughter. Maybe it was the 1,000 sleepless nights after that. But at some point, I stopped believing in people. The room stilled. Silence hung like fog. I built Eonsis with nothing but a laptop and a conviction. And for years, I was celebrated. I had wealth, attention, legacy. But none of it mattered when I lost her, and I walked away from it all, because when you lose what matters most, you stop caring about numbers. He looked up, eyes glassy but fierce. And then, I met a little girl. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care. All she saw was a man freezing to death in an alley, and she gave me the only thing she had, her blanket. A murmur rippled through the crowd. That act brought me back to life, not because of the warmth, but because of what it meant. She saw me when the world didn't. He reached into his suit pocket, pulled out the faded patchwork fabric, and held it high. This is more valuable to me than anything I've ever built. The silence was deafening. That girl's name is Lily Mae Turner, and today I'm proud to announce a $10 million trust in her name to ensure she never has to choose between kindness and survival ever again. Gasps. Applause. But he wasn't done. And that's just the start. I've purchased land in her neighborhood. On it, we will build the Clara Turner Medical Center, a fully funded, state-of-the-art hospital that will offer free health care to every resident, especially children and the elderly. Cameras clicked furiously. You don't measure wealth by what you keep. You measure it by what you give away. And I owe everything to the two women who gave me my soul back. At that moment, two figures were ushered onto the stage. Lily and her grandmother, Clara. Clara looked overwhelmed. Her hands shook slightly, clutching her purse, unsure why she was standing beside billionaires and board members. But Elijah turned toward her, slowly, respectfully, and then he knelt. "Thank you," he said into the microphone, his voice breaking, "for raising an angel, for teaching her that even when you have nothing, you still have everything." The room exploded in applause. Reporters wiped their eyes. A few executives stared at their shoes. Lily ran into Elijah's arms, the blanket between them, and for the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to cry in public, not from grief, but from gratitude. Outside the venue, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread. Signs were held up with messages like, "Hope lives here and kindness changes everything." Social media flooded with hashtags. Blanket, that built, hope. Elijah, rain returns. Kindness economy. Lily changed. The world, CNN, Forbes, and Time all ran specials that week. Not about tech, not about scandal, but about the economics of empathy. How one billionaire traded silence for service, wealth for wellness, and ego for impact. And while the world celebrated Elijah's comeback, he deflected every compliment. "It wasn't me," he said in every interview. "It was the little girl who believed a man still mattered, even when he didn't believe it himself." They say the world doesn't change overnight, but for Lily Mae Turner, it did. 2 weeks after the press conference, a sleek black car pulled up in front of their building again. Only this time, it wasn't there for a press event. It was there for her. Inside sat an acceptance letter, a new school uniform, and a full scholarship to the prestigious Elkwood Academy, one of the top private schools in the state. The kind of place that once felt galaxies away from the chipped tiles and flickering bulbs of her apartment hallway. Lily's name wasn't just penciled into the registry. It was carved into the foundation of something new. She didn't walk through those school gates ashamed of her past. She walked in as a living lesson, proof that kindness is not weakness and that compassion carries value beyond any stock market. Every week, Elijah Rain visited, not as a CEO, not as a media sensation, but as a man with a promise to keep. He helped Lily with homework, listened to her talk about art class, sat on the same squeaky couch he'd once slept beside, eating Clara's oversalted stew like it was a 5-star meal. And he laughed. He actually laughed again. With every visit, something else changed. His posture softened. His voice lightened. The burden he once wore like a shadow began to lift. And with Lily and Clara, He wasn't Elijah Rain the mogul. He was just Mr. Eli, the man who remembered how to be human. Meanwhile, Clara, once a silent soldier of survival, received the kind of care she never dreamed of. Specialists, home nurses, the best treatments all covered, and more importantly, a restored dignity. She said once with a soft chuckle, "I spent my whole life pouring soup into strangers' hands. Never thought the world would pour anything back." But the world had, because one girl poured first. As for the neighborhood, the new Clara Turner Medical Center rose like a phoenix from cracked pavement, brick by brick, wall by wall, built not by politicians or planners, but by the legacy of a blanket and a belief that one act of goodness could rewrite reality. And it did. That building became more than a hospital. It became a symbol, a reminder that in a world of profits, kindness is still the most undervalued asset. Inside the front lobby, mounted in bronze, hung a quote etched beneath a glass case. Inside that case was the very blanket Lily had given Elijah. The quote read, "Sometimes it's not what you have, but what you give that changes the world." Children read it every day. Doctors nodded at it on their way to work. And people who came through those doors broken often left a little more whole. Elijah never returned to his company. He left that chapter behind, sold his remaining shares, and funneled everything into what he now called the Second Act Initiative, an organization dedicated to giving others a chance at redemption, no matter how far they'd fallen. He didn't build tech anymore. He built people. And he said it over and over. If a child with nothing can save a man with everything, then what excuse do the rest of us have? Lily, now older, once asked him why he never replaced the blanket. He smiled. "Because the day I do, I forget who I was when you found me." Years passed. Seasons changed. Lily grew into her future. Clara rested without pain. And Elijah, the billionaire who once vanished, became a grandfather figure in a community that now knew his name not from wealth, but from worth. And somewhere along the line, people stopped whispering about what had happened. They started retelling it to their kids, to their neighbors, to themselves. Not as a fairy tale, but as a true American story. A story about how even the smallest act of kindness can shake the tallest towers. And maybe that's what the world needs more of. Not billionaires, not miracles, but little girls brave enough to see someone when no one else does. What if the story you're living is the miracle someone else is waiting for? What if the simple kindness you gave, the coat you handed to a stranger, the meal you bought for someone with no name, wasn't small at all? What if it was the moment their life turned around? Because that's what Lily taught us. She didn't have millions. She didn't have power. But she had heart. She had compassion. And in a world that often forgets the forgotten, she saw someone the rest of us walked past. And that one act changed everything. So I want to ask you, not as a viewer, but as a fellow human being, have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? Maybe it was a stranger on a cold night. Maybe it was a friend who didn't have the strength to ask. Or maybe it was you. Maybe you were the one who needed help, and someone showed up when you least expected it. Tell that story. Write it in the comments. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to believe people like you still exist. The world isn't changed by headlines. It's changed by humans. One small kindness at a time. And if this story moved you, even just a little, if it reminded you of the kind of world we can build, then don't just scroll past.
Be part of it. Subscribe to Life-Changing Tales, where we tell stories that remind us of who we are when we choose love over fear, people over pride, and purpose over profit. Because in the end, wealth is not measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives we touch. And kindness? Kindness is the only currency that never loses value. So go on. Leave your story. Share this video. And remember, the smallest good deed may be someone's biggest turning point. We'll see you in the next story.